Before we start this video, I just wanted to mention that I did a discussion video on Nathaniel Bandy's channel where Nathaniel Bandy and I discuss our favorite NES games. I recommend giving it a watch after this video, or before it. It depends. You can decide which one you want to watch first. It was a lot of fun, so go watch it if you want. Anyways, let's get started with the actual video, shall we? Hello everyone, Alec Alger the SideQuest Gamer here, with a review of a somewhat forgotten Star Wars game, and that would be Star Wars Dark Forces for MS-DOS. Yes, I admit I wanted to do this review in December for one reason and one reason only, to coincide with the release of Star Wars Rogue One in theaters, and when I read what Rogue One was going to be about, which is pretty much the tech scroll of A New Hope, I knew I wanted that Star Wars game to be Dark Forces. Why? Because while Rogue One tells the story of how the Rebels got the Death Star plans, that's for the new Star Wars canon, but what about the old Star Wars Legends canon? How did they do it in that version of the story? To be honest, the whole game isn't based around getting the Death Star plans, but rather a different project. The Death Star plans was just the first mission to get into the swing of things, but I did want to show off how it was done in that canon. The game begins with a very charming yet dated MIDI version of the Star Wars text scroll theme, and then one of the rebel leaders, Mon Mothma, sends you on a mission to get the plans to the planet-destroying space station known as the Death Star, run by the tyrannical Galactic Empire. You, being mercenary Kyle Katarn, accept this mission and land in the Imperial base in planet Dantuna, where the Death Star plans are being held. This level is very short and not hard to navigate. You learn to grow accustomed to the control scheme, mainly movement and shooting, despite there not being tutorials like in this day and age, hence why I didn't learn there was a jump button until the second mission, so I do recommend looking up the control scheme before jumping into this game. The enemy types, being stormtroopers and Imperial officers, are the only ones that stand between you and the Death Star plans, and they're not that hard to take down. Once you take out the last of them and get the Death Star plans, your ship, the Moldy Crow, arrives and the game fast forwards to some time after the Death Star was destroyed. Just to establish some timeline, the first mission takes place before the first movie, while the rest of the game takes place at some unknown period of time after the first movie. The game doesn't rely on the movies to tell the story it wants to, but it's much more impactful if you do watch the movies before playing this game, just to appreciate the cameo appearances all the more. For the rest of this game, the Rebels send you and your pilot Jan Ors on several missions where you slowly uncover an Imperial project that threatens the welfare of the Rebel Alliance, and the Rebels hire Kyle to stop this new threat. In the second mission on the planet Tele, you're to investigate a war-torn Rebel base that was attacked by the Imperials with a new weapon unlike their standard blasters. When investigating the base, he finds an Imperial weapon with the initials MR, which the Rebels identify as the work of Imperial weapons engineer Moff Freebus. The next few missions build up to the revelation of the Dark Trooper project, run by the game's main antagonist being General Mach, who later wants Kyle dead after he's been frequently getting in the way of his plans. The story of the game isn't anything deep or compelling, but it does kind of make you feel like a mercenary going on secret important missions for the Rebel Alliance to stop the Empire's deadly plans. I do have to admit though that the Dark Troopers, unless playing the game on a hard difficulty, aren't as threatening as the game makes them out to be, with the exception of the only Model 3 serving as the final boss. The game does succeed in build-up though, as I was genuinely terrified of the Mark I Dark Trooper when it was unveiled in the Gromus Mines. I didn't see it coming and immediately took cover, and then proceeded to destroy it with ease, but the build-up was great. And despite the boss battles being very intense, yet not the most complex, the build-up to the bosses like Boba Fett is amazing, where you see Darth Vader and General Mach hiring him, and a few missions later when you're done with the mission's objective, your ship isn't present and in its place is Boba Fett waiting for you, and then you proceed to fight. Even the final boss has build-up, tying up not one loose end, but two, being General Mach and the Dark Trooper project. Spoiler alert! General Mach gets into a Dark Trooper Mark III suit, gives you a run for your money, but defeating him and ending the mission just felt right, especially when the ship blows up, destroying not only General Mach, but any hope of the Dark Trooper project being revived. And if that wasn't reward enough for you, well, Mon Mothma gives you the Star of Alderaan medal, so be happy. Darth Vader also says,
"This is is an unfortunate setback. The Force is strong with Katarn.
As you leave the ship you just destroyed, either foreshadowing the sequel where Kyle does learn he's Force sensitive, or just as a sign of admiration for Kyle's resilience. The characters, however, aren't really anything compelling other than what their actions dictate and how they react to other characters and events. Mon Mothma is a usual leader-type figure who's all about the good of the Rebel Alliance and doesn't get emotional or anything.
This Imperial officer, Crix Medine, wishes to defect to the Alliance. He has supplied us with information on the development of a new Imperial weapon. Those sounds you heard, we believe, come from that weapon.
She does serve the role of giving you or Jan the information needed for the mission, and that's really about it. Like the movies, I'm really indifferent to her character. Then again, she does all she really needed to do to move the plot along as a tertiary character. Jan Ors is pretty likable in the mission briefings, and how she always picks up Kyle after the mission is over. She doesn't have much emotion shown other than in the briefings, and usually it's just friendly banter, like how after you both escape Jabba's palace, she said she owes you one. Her character does get fleshed out immensely in the two follow-up games being Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 and Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, in which their chemistry improves immensely, but the game does make the player comfortable with her presence as a memorable secondary character.
You better get me out of here. I think I just finished off a Dark Trooper. I don't want to find out if there are any more around.
Okay, Kyle. Sounds good to me.
But who really steals the show is the primary antagonist being General Mog, who's very intent in bringing down Kyle and creating the Dark Troopers for the Empire. From capturing Imperial defector Crix Medine to even placing a bounty on Kyle's head, General Mog, while not being the most entertaining of villains, is the highlight of the game.
Katarn will not be as easy to deal with. He is very resourceful. More resourceful, it seems, than even your Dark Troopers.
I understand the threat, Lord Vader. Katarn was once an impressive Imperial officer, but he was weak and gave up on the struggle for our new order. I wouldn't put much faith in his abilities. Katarn will never come near this ship. My new hire will see to that.
I especially love the final confrontation where Kyle and Mog finally meet face to face as he spouts his overconfidence before the doors open, revealing what he's bringing to the fight, and facing you in a very heated battle.
It's been a long time since I've challenged a man to battle. I'm glad my opponent is so worthy.
And Kyle Katarn himself is not that bad of a character, at least for this game's standards. I do find him a little conceited, especially when Mon Mothma's briefing him, and he's just sitting there like an authority-defying gothic teenager, like, yeah, whatever. I'm sorry, but that's a player's job, not the game's. My favorite moment with Kyle was when he and Jan were captured by Jabba the Hutt and how he threatens to stick a blaster down Jabba's slimy throat if he harms Jan.
Jabba, what have you done with Jan? If any harm comes to her, I'll personally shove my blaster down your slimy throat.
No one messes with the mob boss Jabba, except for Kyle, as he knows there's no getting out of this situation anyways. There's also appearances by Darth Vader, Boba Fett, and Jabba the Hutt, and this game does depict them well so much that those who've seen the original trilogy would appreciate them being here, but they're not long enough appearances to have a lasting impact on the story direction, other than Vader himself, since he's pretty much the Emperor's messenger boy, and second in command of sorts.
The Emperor has approved your test demonstration, General Monk.
Thank you, Lord Vader.
The game itself is a Doom-type FPS released in 1995 for the DOS operating system and Mac computers, and was developed and published by LucasArts. Rest in peace, LucasArts. Development was led by Darren Stitton and began in 1993. The idea of making Star Wars an FPS apparently was inspired by Star Wars fan-made mods for Doom, but despite looking like Doom, there's a surprising amount of standout things that makes it less of a Doom clone and more its own thing. One of these things are enemy-held items where some Imperial officers have a progression reliance item like a key card, and when you do get it, you have to go into your inventory and match the symbols with the 3 monitors to unlock a door. This makes it feel more like an action-adventure FPS than the traditional Doom clone, where the only strategy was finding a keycard on some podium or even lying on a floor somewhere, and then proceeding forward. There's also the mission briefings where you're told what to do, and even the method of exiting the level being a geometrical ship moving in and landing thanks to the capabilities of the Jedi engine this game used. These, while may seem minor additions to the FPS formula, do a standout job in immersing the player, making you feel like an actual part of the Star Wars universe. I'm not saying the action-adventure style for this FPS is better by any means, as I do prefer Doom's quicker-paced way of progression, but I have to give credit to Dark Forces for giving itself an identity, rather than taking the easy way out and just make another Doom clone. And if that wasn't convincing enough, you can jump, duck, and even the ability to aim upwards or downwards, which is mandatory for blaster-activated switches. Yes, while there are similarities to Doom, labeling it as a rip-off of Doom wouldn't be entirely fair, as that would be like calling Serious Sam a Duke Nukem 3D rip-off. Yes, there are similarities that can be drawn. I do believe the differences stand out more than the similarities. But despite these positives, I do think there are several things that can make or break the game for some people. The gameplay, while being a Doom-type FPS, involves you shooting, exploring, and progressing from point A to point B. The thing is that, unlike Doom, these levels can get really long and very open, making a first playthrough a little bit intimidating. Most of the time I could find my own way out thanks to the tab map, but there were a few instances like on Planet Fest where I was so lost spending over 20 minutes trying to find a way out, I actually felt the need to watch a video playthrough of it online, and even then I was dumbfounded by the solution, whether it be a secret passage or a ledge below me I was not aware of nor given any context to. Another inconvenience is the default control scheme for the original release of this game. This was before the ASDW movement controls were a thing, so you control your character with the arrow keys, strafe with the period and comma keys depending on the direction, and fire with the Z or control key. There's also C for crouch and X for jump, but if you want to look up and down, I find myself annoyingly stopping in my place and repositioning the aim with page up and page down keys. The solution could be just to move your hand onto the numerical keypad, but as someone who uses the arrow keys and then the ASDW keys to move in other PC games, having the 2, 4, 6, 8 layout feels clunky and unnatural. I would have made it be like 4, 5, 6, 8. I can't really fault the control scheme for not being my preferred ASDW for movement and arrow keys for camera movement, but unless you're playing a better version like the Steam one, I feel that the controls for the original did not hold up that well. They're manageable when you get used to them, but even then I don't feel like I'm playing up to optimal levels. It's also a shame that the original version doesn't allow you to change up the controls. I checked, and all there was the option to hook up a gamepad and configure those controls. But not the keyboards? What the heck, LucasArts? You're killing me! I was fine with this control scheme in Doom because there was no aiming upwards or downwards, there was no crouching, and there was no jumping. Just move and strafe, and the enemy would be in your line of fire. Not to mention the airborne enemies gave you plenty of time to dodge their attacks, but enemies like probe droids would shoot you quickly while you're clumsily trying to aim at them and then firing. That is not fun, that is kind of frustrating. Yes, while Doom doesn't have jump or aim controls, this is one of the times where limitations actually enhance the experience rather than be a detriment to it when playing this decades later. But other than that, Star Wars Dark Forces is pretty good overall. It's not the best Star Wars game I've ever played, nor the best Star Wars game in the 90s, but it's definitely a highlight in the Star Wars video game library. It's by no means a masterpiece, and it does kind of show its age, mainly with a very MIDI soundtrack that does its best to sound like Star Wars and is kind of charming, but still kind of dated. I do think that this game is definitely worth getting on Steam. I wouldn't recommend the original version for DOS over the others due to the somewhat clunky control scheme, but then again there's also the Dark XL mod which gives you the widescreen options in addition to a fixed control scheme. Heck, there's even the addition of crosshairs, but I really never needed them. But whatever version you play, I can see you having a relatively fun time, especially if you're into the classic style FPS like I am. And if you're a Star Wars fan like me, you'll definitely get a lot of enjoyment thanks to the cameo appearances and the added lore that expands from the existing universe. Too bad it's not canon anymore with the Force Awakens timeline, but I don't care. It's a part of the Legends canon, and that's all that really matters to me. You know, the same canon where Darth Vader purchases Luke Skywalker's cut-off hand for some sick reason, Boba Fett has some Deus Ex Machina where he survived the Sarlacc worm, Luke Skywalker getting married despite Jedi being forbidden to marry, and Emperor Palpatine cloning himself a million times with the clones awakening in the event he dies. Yeah, that canon. I'm honestly open to the new Disney canon, but it's kind of a shame that the Legends timeline is not canon anymore because we got some really cool characters like the Imperial Admiral Thrawn, but they threw Legends fans a bone in Star Wars Rebels Season 3, making him 20 years younger and now has a receding hairline. So, Admiral Thrawn is canon again, and that's all I really need. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Tune into the season where I review the Nintendo GameCube console as celebration for 1,000 fantastic subscribers. Thank you all so much for making me reach that goal. But as always, thank you all so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.